The Call of the Breach, Part 8.
DisastrousInvolvedI.
Disclaimer: the content presented in this video is purely fictional and intended for entertainment purposes only.
The makeshift headquarters for our tiny alliance was already packed by the time we arrived, and I found myself standing beside the rest of the officials, along with the other lieutenants from both our Rangers and Ark Rivers forces. All in all, we squeezed into the crowded olive-green surplus tent, around a rectangular folding table where Sean spread out a large paper map of Barron County. Our plan is to move fast, up the lesser-used secondary roads, to put Black Oak in a pincer. He placed wooden tokens on the map to signify various units and moved them into position as he spoke. Our scouts will lead the way through the marshlands in the north, and we will take the enemy by surprise. Hit-and-run attacks will wear down their outer defenses, including outposts and patrol bases, leaving the city exposed. Our guns can help breach the outer walls, and once inside, we will secure the warehouses, weapons depots, and headquarters respectively. If we can close with their heavy armor before it can deploy, we can overwhelm it. Without those, Elsa won't be able to maintain their defense, and will be forced to withdraw. Sean gestured to Sarah and pointed to a cluster of buildings on the map. Our researchers will send medical aid teams to occupy these abandoned buildings in a chain down the valley, allowing us to relay wounded to Ark River in rapid fashion. Each stronghold will be heavily defended by machine guns and flamethrowers. Enough to keep both mutants and Elsa at bay. I take it that's where my boys come in? Ethan scratched his chin, both arms folded in contemplation. Correct. Aside from securing our main supply route, your workers will form the bulk of our regular forces behind the Rangers. Sean slid his forefinger along the winding road leading from Black Oak to the interior of the county. They'll be key in organizing our logistics as well as casualty evacuation. Advanced combat units will be small and mobile, to keep enemy drones, artillery, or aircraft from targeting them. We Rangers will be on the front line then? Chris hooked both thumbs into his belt, shifted on his feet, with our riders. Of course. Adam answered instead of Sean this time, one hand resting idly on the hilt of his cruciform sword. Our men are ready to take the fight to the enemy. With our deer, we can move easily through the swamps, and circle around them to cut off supply lines. Sean nodded his dark-haired head and pushed a few tokens around on the map to indicate the aforementioned movements. Ark River will serve as harassment and scouting parties to keep them guessing as to where our main force is. Our Rangers will act as shock troops to crack Elsa's main defensive line and connect with the resistance members inside Black Oak. From where I stood, I chewed the inside of my cheek with a mild frown, as a realization settled in. In all these complex war plans, no one had mentioned the puppet army yet. True, Elsa was a massive threat, but the mutant king posed no less of a danger, and he could be anywhere outside the protective walls of Ark River. Man, I hate being the one to do this. I swallowed hard and dared to raise my voice. What about Vesatorak? All eyes turned to me, and embarrassed heat flooded my face. Even now, after all the things I'd done, risks I'd taken, victories I'd had, speaking in front of others still made my guts churn. Chris was perfect for this kind of thing, governing, making big decisions, debating people. I preferred to go on patrols with my little platoon, where the choices were simple, the rules easy to follow, and the world, though cruel, made sense. Once we take Black Oak, we'll have a fortress so strong even he couldn't breach it. Sean tapped his finger on the borders of the city. As soon as Elsa is pushed to the county line, we can range into the center of the county to look for Vesatorak. Regardless of when, our main problem will be finding him. His forces have disappeared. Next to her husband, Eve scowled at the map and thought, the enmity between the Mold King and the Ark River people almost as personal as my own due to Vesatorak's enslavement of their unredeemed kin. Even in their natural state, the Lost Ones shouldn't be able to conceal so many of their own within the forests. Especially not without leaving enough sign for us to track. It's as if they all turned invisible. If anyone could hide that well, it would be them. I met her gaze, curious at hearing my own thoughts voiced from another person, and eager to try and solve them now that I had more allies in this task. Maybe they dug some kind of underground tunnel system to hide in? I suppose it's possible. Eve shrugged her narrow shoulders and brushed a stray lock of golden hair from her equally luminous eyes. But what tracks we do find keep appearing in random places, far from each other, and with no burrows or holes anywhere nearby. That much movement means they can't be spending enough time digging to build a tunnel network big enough to hide them all. They can't be covering the distance on foot either, we'd find the tracks. Heart pounding at the way everyone else waited on me to make my point, I stepped closer to the table and swept the faded paper map with my gaze in hopes of finding solutions. I think he's getting ready to make a move. Vesatorak has to be watching us just like we're hunting for him, and if he's hiding his movements, it can only mean he's preparing something he doesn't want us to see. We can't leave him in our rear area, or he'll pick off our supply trucks one by one. Ethan jerked a thumb over his shoulder. We can load down the trucks with extra supplies, so we don't have to run so many convoys back and forth. It'll keep our footprint low and make it harder for Elsa to track us by air. The Mold King surely can't keep up with our convoys. His birch crawlers can. Chris's eyes collided with mine from across the table in a knowing look, and he shook his head. He's smart. Last time he set an ambush to immobilize our trucks, because he knows they can't catch us on the open road. Hannah's right, Vesatorak needs to be neutralized first. Sarah rested her hands on both hips. Should we though? I mean, last time we lost quite a few men, and from what the survivors said, Vesatorak managed to exert some kind of telepathic influence to stun them. Only Hannah wasn't affected. That earned even more intense stares. The others eyeing my silver tattoos that ran across the right side of my face in silent uncertainty. Yeah, that's me, the freak of nature. Sean rubbed his chiseled jaw and sighed. If we can't find him, we can't hit him. You make a valid point, Brun, but if we don't move on Black Oak before they deploy those tanks, the war is over. Once we get Elsa out of Barren County, we can link up with the resistance and turn all our forces on Vesatorak. Biting my lip, I forced myself to nod, my chest deflated in acknowledgement that he was right. I couldn't expect the world to stop just because I had a different opinion, but the thought of driving north to fight Elsa in the woods, while the shadowy priest of doom stalked me like a tiger in the long grass, made my skin crawl. Even the ego-fueled head of Elsa, George Caranti, wanted to keep the breach and its denizens contained, to prevent them from spreading beyond Barren County into the rest of the world. Vesatorak was the walking embodiment of the threat imposed on our planet by the breach, and while I knew a bullet could stop Caranti, I had yet to think of anything that could put the Mold King down. After all, the freak had taken a gunshot to the chest and walked it off like a mosquito bite. If Vesatorak was truly immortal, how on earth were we going to stop him if we did find him? In a subconscious reflex, I glanced around to look for Jamie's reaction, and felt a pang of loneliness at remembering that I didn't have her to rely on anymore. Like so many of the people I'd come to know when I arrived at New Wilderness, Jamie Lonson had been ripped out of my life, and while she wasn't dead yet, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered the word I feared the most. Yet, right then, any further questions? I looked up to find the meeting over, having continued on in my mental absence, and shook my head along with the others. Chris would relay any orders I needed to know for my platoon, and I wanted to use today to catch up on some rest, as we would be moving out the following dawn. As I turned to leave with the crowd, Sean's voice stopped me. Lieutenant Brun? A moment. Chris paused at the tent doorframe and gave my arm a discreet squeeze. I'll be outside. Figure I can help get your boys squared away, then you can get some shut-eye before the big push. Go on. Already tired just thinking about the amount of work required to prepare my men for tomorrow morning, I returned to the table, Sean and I alone in the dim canvas shelter. He leaned one hand on the map table and Sean ran one set of fingers through his hair, dark in exhaustion. There is an additional assignment I have for you. One that we have to keep between ourselves. It's a matter of defense secrets. I stiffened a little at that, the words eerily familiar to me for how often they'd related to horrible events in the past. Of course, sir. In a secretive hunch. Sean leaned closer and lowered his voice. We need to have a team of researchers and rangers on standby inside Silo 48, in case we have to launch on short notice. If Elsa got their hands on the nukes, we'd be done for. Your platoon will escort the team to the bunker, and get them settled in, then, you'll continue on with your official mission to reconnoiter the north. We are going to use them, then. Disturbed at that concept, I glanced down at the map, noting the empty green patch where I knew the bunker lay. So, who's going to get the launch keys? They're going to need Bot H, which is going to mean a massive security risk. I'd say Chris would be a good choice, but we'll need him in the field. Sarah told me her crew analyzed the documents you brought back from the bunker, and apparently, they think there's a way to convert one of the auxiliary control panels to a remote launch shortwave system. His mahogany-colored iris's eyes scanned the inked hills, trees, and ridges, as if already searching for invisible enemies. It would help us keep the launch capabilities mobile with us and ensure that neither Elsa nor Vesatorak could overwhelm the facility by sheer force to use the missiles. Once the team reaches the bunker, they can convert the panel, pre-install the keys, and hand it off to you. Time seemed to stop, the air caught in my lungs, and I swayed on my heels. Me? Sean gave me a small, proud smile. You're one of the few people I know would never hand it over to Elsa, and Vesatorak's abilities don't work on you. The safety of the device is paramount. Once you have the panel, you'll proceed north and rendezvous with my convoy, and I'll take it from there. Last time I carried something that important, I almost got killed 3 different times, pulse roaring in my temple. I shook my head. Sir, with all due respect, why not keep the keys inside the bunker? No one else knows it's there, it'd be far safer. Our platoon could be destroyed. I could be captured, and so could the bunker. Sean's hard gaze caught and held mine, and he folded both massive arms to accentuate his point. The garrison there will be given charges to install, to blow up the missiles in case they are overrun. You will destroy the launch panel and keys if you believe capture draws near. But why bother if we can't even use them? I dug my thumbnail into my hip to prevent myself from breaking out into a nervous sweat at the authority being entrusted to me. I mean, Chris and I have talked about it, and he said he didn't think there was a situation where the nukes can help us. We can't launch on Black Oak, it'd lose us the war. If we fail, either Elsa or Vesatorak will swarm over Barren County. Sean gestured at the map with a broad arc of his hand. Vesatorak might even cover the world if he succeeds. If the day comes when our defeat is all but certain, we'll send the missiles into the sky and bring them back down on Barren County to wipe the slate clean once and for all. Mother of God, my stomach clenched, the enormity of that like a truck on my intestines. You mean, kill everyone? His hand rested on my shoulder, heavy, but compassionate, calloused from many days of brutal manual labor at the reserve. Elsa, we can survive, they are men, corrupt and evil, but men nonetheless. They can be fought, or brought to justice if possible. But Vesatorak? A nuclear warhead would be a mercy compared to whatever he has in store. So, it's a failsafe? A last resort? We won't actually use it, right? I angled my head to plead with Sean, peering into his dark eyes in hopes of securing a form of comfort at my chilling orders. Sean's features drew into a grim resignation that didn't inspire any sort of optimism. I hope not, Hannah, but those missiles are the only sure thing we have to stand between us and total oblivion. That's why I had to overlook your objections earlier. I can't have you hunting Vesatorak down when I need your help securing those nukes. Moreover, if the time comes to act, and I'm not able to, you will be the only person authorized to issue a launch command. Circling back behind the table, Sean reclined into a small folding chair and rested both arms on the table before him, fingers interlaced. I know you understand just how important this is. Decker seemed to think you were up to the challenge when I asked him about it in private, so I won't order you to do it. I want you to go on your own volition. If you don't want the job, I'll try to find someone else, though I can't honestly say I'd be that confident in another choice. It's up to you, Brun. Can you do this for me? I stood, stock still, frozen in the moment. How long ago had I been offered such a petrifying choice by our commander, in his old office at New Wilderness, when I first chose the Rangers as my home faction? Jamie had been at my side then. Cheered me on, guided me to make the right call. Now I stood alone in front of Sean, with no one to advise me but myself. It was the biggest responsibility of my life, and one that shook me to the bone. To be able to launch a nuclear strike, to obliterate all of Barren County in the blink of an eye, to disintegrate both friend and foe in one last doom stand was nightmarish to think of, but I knew that Sean was right. True bravery is being willing to do hard things for the good of others. As fresh as the day I'd heard it after being rescued from Elsa headquarters, Kaba's voice echoed from my memories, one of many people in my journey who had put their life on the line for me. I couldn't let them all down, not now. With a practiced rigidity, I straightened to give Sean a salute that would have made Jamie proud. Consider it done, sir. The Call of the Breach, Part 9. Golden sunlight streamed down from overhead, a warm reprieve from the chill of the late fall day, but I couldn't enjoy it for the deep boom booms that echoed in the distance. Eagle 5, good effect on target. 100 over 100. Rhino 1 actual, out. My chest cramped at the sound of Chris's voice over the radio headset, and my nervous heart skipped a beat. They'd been shelling an Elsa sentry post for the past few minutes, and if the field guns we'd built at New Wilderness had been called off, it meant they'd done their job well. I wanted to believe that Chris and his soldiers weren't in any danger, but I knew better. Even here, a few miles away, I could feel the crump of more gun batteries sending their final volley into the sky. And my heightened senses could pick up the faint taste of smoke on the breeze. Once I meet up with Sean, I can go check on Chris. He's got to report into HQ at some point, right? I need to see him, just once, just to be sure. Biting my lower lip in frustration, I kicked at a muddy tire on my battered green SUV. As we weren't meant to take part in frontline combat, not yet anyway, our platoon had received unarmored regular civilian vehicles patched together from spare parts instead of the up-armored trucks which were in short supply. They ran, which was a miracle and a half, but staring at my meager convoy with the sound of distant gunfire in my ears only accentuated my unease. Sure, I had no desire to go back into combat, with bullets snapping by my head and bombs raining from the sky, but I hated being stuck in the rear while Chris and the others risked their lives. Man, it just doesn't stop. Lucille hefted my camera in her hands and shuddered at the machine gun fire on the horizon. Standing at the edge of the field, I nodded and watched the silo team lower supplies down the access hatch with ropes. Silo 48 lay concealed beneath a flat, grassy meadow, but despite the sunshine, the distant chirping of birds in the trees, I couldn't shake the queasiness from the pit of my gut that this place gave me. We'd scanned for radiation 3 times, but the researchers of the silo team concluded that, though there were strange variations in the background radiation, none of it was at a harmful level. Still, my camera screen had twitched when I turned it on, and I didn't plan on using it long here, just in case some unseen electromagnetic energy damaged it. Still, better to get some footage now, just in case. I turned to Lucille, and eyed the camera lens pointed my way. The feeling of being in front of the camera for a change bizarre. We won't be here long, so if you've got anything that needs doing, do it now. Once the team is settled in, we're heading north to meet up with headquarters. Anything we run into, we call into Sean and wait for backup. Lucille yawned and itched at the back of her neck. You think we'll see any action? Prying clumps of mud from my boot on the bumper of my command vehicle, I tried to ignore the nervous butterflies in my stomach. Probably. With how few of us there are overall, I don't think we'll be able to stay out of it forever. Let's just hope Elsa isn't expecting us. Her eyes hardened with that knowledge, and Lucille lowered my camera to cock her head to one side. Do you think we could find a way to contact Andrea once we get close to the walls? We'll definitely try. I plucked a strand of the nearby tall grass and started to shred it with my thumbnail. She's one of the few leaders they've got left, so I figure once we make contact with their units, she'll hear about it. Maybe when that happens, we can send her a message just from you. That, of course, was a half-truth. I had no idea if Andrea was alive or dead, but I needed Lucille at her best, along with all my platoon, and she seemed to accept the idea readily enough. Right now, our survival mattered more, and that meant keeping my crew focused. Sparrow 1 actual, this is Hornet 1 actual, we need you below decks. One of the researchers' voices crackled through the radio headset over my ears, and I pushed off from the well-worn SUV to head for the hatchway. I'm on my way. I clicked the mic, then turned to Lucille, and motioned for the convoy. Stow the camera and be ready to move out. We don't want to be late. It took a few minutes to clamber down into the dark maw of the nuclear missile silo from the long ladder at the hatch, but soon I found myself at the bottom and worked my way past the mounted boxes of supplies into the interior. Researchers and a few guard rangers were there, mostly hard at work checking the various panels. The electrical system all lit up after the lead scientists managed to get the generator back online. The garrison mainly consisted of people unfit for combat, the elderly, younger children, and a few people with acute medical conditions. Only the handful of guards were able-bodied, and even then, these were all teens below the age of 14. With aged weapons and sullen frowns. They'd been ordered to hide behind the sturdy blast doors of the bunker until receiving further instructions from Sean, and while the bunker's heating system warmed the facility to pre-breach levels of comfort, it was still a dark, gloomy place to stay. The lead researcher met me halfway down the flight of steps to the lower level of the control room, a green canvas sling bag in his wizened hands. An older man in his mid-70s, his wrinkled face was somewhat pale, but he handed it to me without fanfare, along with 2 familiar silver keys on the end of a small metallic chain. Everything should be in order. He glanced at the bundle in my hands. And the old man rubbed at his skinny arm in nervousness. There's an instruction manual in there too, just the basics I clipped out of a larger one. It's a fairly advanced trajectory calculation system for the time period, mostly analog, but not so complex that we'll need satellite guidance. Most targets already have preset coordinates built in, based off Cold War priority lists. There's even a talk function where the machine repeats pre-recorded commands through a speaker, the best they could get before artificial voice synthesis. We'll have 24 missiles in total, all that can launch within 5 minutes. I swallowed hard, and fought the urge to throw the panel as far from myself as possible. Thanks. As I turned to leave, the elderly scientist called out to me one more time. Lieutenant? This whole thing, it's silly, isn't it? I mean, they're not actually going to use them, right? Your guess is as good as mine. Unsure of what to say, I paused at the foot of the ladder, but couldn't find the strength to formulate a convincing lie. Instead, I simply climbed back up the cold metal ladder, and into the sunlit world of the surface. On the road once more, my radio crackled to life as our trucks bumped along a rutted, narrow secondary lane. All units, this is Rhino 1 Actual. Chris's voice echoed through the radio headsets, low and serious. Objective is secure. We are Oscar Mike. My shoulders relaxed, and I let out a long sigh of relief. Our radio traffic had to be disguised, in case Elsa intercepted it, but soon they would know we were coming for them. The trick would be to stay ahead of their aircraft, artillery, and recon units long enough to destroy their outposts, and render them blind to everything outside the walls of Black Oak. All the regular line units were Rhinos, Sean was Hilltop, and the Ark River fighters were Stags. The bunker team were all Hornets given the speed and sting of their hidden weapons, and our artillery were Eagles. My platoon, being one of 3 advanced scout units not from Ark River, was designated Sparrow 1. And I clicked my mic to render my pre-arranged call sign. Hilltop, this is Sparrow 1, we are Oscar Mike from the Hornet's Nest, how copy, over? Solid copy Sparrow 1, rendezvous with me at rally point 12. Hilltop out. Tracing my fingers over a ragged topographical map I kept folded within a protective screen of clear cellophane, I tapped the location with my finger, and waved at the road ahead. Alright Charlie, we're going to take the next right, and stay on that road for 3 miles. Driving through the ruined countryside of Barron County had always been surreal for its post-human desolation, but as we drew closer to the ever-shifting front lines, we found new additions to the tapestry of death. Burning Elsa vehicles, smoldering ruins of sandbag outposts, and the motionless corpses of dead soldiers left to bloat in the sun. Most were far enough off the road to where we only caught glimpses, but we passed one checkpoint that had been overrun by our forces so recently that the spattered blood on the gravel was still cherry red. All of the enemy had been stripped of anything useful, some in their underwear, their boots gone, not so much as a glove left on them. The air stank of rancid burned hair, sickly sweet flesh, and rank boiled blood, more than one body trapped in the flaming Elsa trucks that lined the narrow roadways. It made my guts roll, but I focused on getting my troops through the logjam. And soon we came upon live men wearing the greenfield jackets of the new Wilderness Coalition. They waved us through the rearguard checkpoints, and we drove into the improvised main camp of our field army. Here the circle of barbed wire was small, the lookouts wary, the tents hastily erected. Our strategy relied on never staying in one place too long, since the further north we went, the closer we got to Elsa's air assets, radio direction finding devices, and drones. As such, the camp was far less permanent than New Wilderness or Ark River, but still it buzzed with activity. Messengers on the backs of horses, bone-faced whitetail, or even a few motorcycles came and went carrying orders to units that weren't Vitalino. Ugh, to risk putting on the radio, thus reducing our odds of being detected by Elsa. Medics carried wounded on stretchers, not many, but enough that it made my heart twinge in sympathy at the bloody, broken figures of my fellow rangers. Ammunition carriers moved with the messengers to bring more supplies to the front, and a generator powered a nearby radio antenna to extend our signal range to the entire front line. parking our vehicles in a small motor pool where several others were, I gave my platoon 15 minutes to rest, while I grabbed the canvas bag with the launch panel and headed for Sean's tent. The moment I stepped inside, he greeted me with a relieved nod and locked the missile control module in a small metal cabinet bolted inside his command vehicle.
Well done, Brun. That went smoother than I thought. Any trouble at the site?
If there will be trouble, I have a feeling it won't be during daylight hours. I shook my head and dug my thumbnail into the leather strap of my Type 9 to distract my nervous thoughts.
I don't think anyone knows it's there.
Good. Sean rested his hands on both hips and surveyed the battle map in front of him.
We're making great progress.
Most ELSA forces in the Central Valley have been pushed out, and casualties have been pretty light. At this point, we're looking at setting up camp near the first phase line of our offensive. Trying not to make it obvious that I was eyeing everyone in the tent. Searching for Chris, I shuffled on my muddy boot heels.
So, where do you want us?
He pointed to a hilltop on the map, radio operators and message couriers swirling around us in their tasks like fish in a coral reef.
We've got a forward aid station set up here, about 5 miles north.
They radioed in a half hour ago saying they needed more supplies. You and your platoon can run that up to them, and from there you'll range north to scout the forward enemy positions. So much for finding Chris today. Saluting, I drew a deep breath of disappointment.
Will do, sir.
In another 15 minutes we rolled back out the gates of the primitive base, and into the chaos of our front line. Moving north, I saw more evidence of the fighting, more destroyed vehicles bathed in wreaths of red flame, more sprawling bodies crumpled where they'd been cut down by gunfire, and muddy shell craters where enemy positions had been demolished by our artillery. However, the roar of the howitzers only grew louder, the chatter of machine guns more pronounced, and twice we passed ambulance trucks marked with red crosses as they ferried wounded from the aid stations. Here a few of the wrecks were our own, 2 unarmored trucks melted to scrap metal, and one of the special up-armored pickups nearly blown in half by a rocket. Our tires gritted over spent casings that dotted the roadway in a glittering golden sheen. And I tasted the acrid gunpowder residue hanging in the air like a thin fog. At last, a small pine-ridden knoll with an improvised tractor path leading to its crest came into view, and I held my breath as we slowly inched up the precarious trail to the summit. Barbed wire and foxholes with machine gun nests circled its perimeter, manned by the younger members of our coalition who weren't meant for frontline work. Inside, a row of tents housed scurrying crews of researcher medics, many with rusty red smears on their white aprons, and I recognized quite a few girls who had once wrinkled their nose at mud on the clinic floor in New Wilderness. It was the screams, however, that sent shudders of dread through my spine the instant I opened my truck door. Agonized cries of wounded, the metallic scent of blood on the air, and the hollow eyes of the passing nurses spoke volumes. A small cluster of blanket-covered bodies lay motionless outside one tent, close to 10 sets of boots poking from underneath them in a lifeless slump. Everywhere the place oozed with human misery, including a small wire pen containing several gray-clad prisoners, most of them a mass of white cotton bandages that were already soaked through with blood. One solitary boy, perhaps no older than 12 or 13, stood guard over the miniature POW cage with an aged shotgun, but I could tell from his indifferent slouch that he knew as well as I did that those men were going nowhere. Our own troops were prioritized by the medical staff, and as if to accentuate the need, they carried one man inside with 3 tourniquets on the shredded remnants of what had once been a leg. Mere seconds later, I caught the cruel slush of a saw working through flesh that made a wave of nausea rise in my stomach. He was one of ours, but obviously whatever painkillers we had were in short supply, as the poor fellow shrieked until I assumed he passed out, the saw continuing its grim work regardless of his silence. Doubtless the girls of the researcher faction had done only what was necessary to preserve the man's life, but still, the noise set my teeth on edge. Yeah, I'm not sleeping tonight.
All right, squad leaders take charge and get the aid unloaded.
I barked at the others, and swallowed a sour-tasting gulp of air that made me gag for the stench on it.
We're Oscar Mike in 30 minutes.
Desperate to report to the head nurse so I could be rid of this place as fast as possible. I pushed through the swirl of busy people until one of the nearby machine gunners called out to me from their dugout, "Lieutenant." My legs ground to a halt, and I returned a weary salute to the 3 thin-faced teenagers in the foxhole, trying to look as stoic as possible.
Morning, boys. You all good here? Need anything?
For a moment, they eyed each other in pale trepidation and glanced out beyond their belt-fed weapon into the forest not 15 yards distant.
"We're all set, ma'am," the gunner replied, though his nervous eyes said otherwise. "It's just, we wanted you to see this." He pointed down the hill to where a birch tree stood amongst the tangle of oaks, maples, and the few pines that clustered the top of the hill. At first, I was confused at what he meant, but then my eyes sharpened, the enhanced irises focused with ease, and I picked it out before he even said a word. Drawn on the trunk of the birch stood a black figure, long and spindly, with a head like an upside-down triangle, a twig-like crown, and 2 arms extended outward. Kneeling worshippers were daubed around its feet, and wavy lines radiated from the tall figure's hands. It had been painted in some kind of dark mixture, likely mud and rot, though I had a feeling there were more vile ingredients to it. Handprints dotted the tree around the bizarre hieroglyph, all human in shape, of varying sizes, nearly covering the trunk so that it looked mottled. "Lieutenant?" I blinked and looked down to find them watching me with unease. "Should we call headquarters?" Hefting his rifle, the gunner threw a suspicious frown toward the woods. "I mean, we've got plenty of ammo, but if there's something out there it'd sure be nice to know." Holding my breath, I remembered Sean's words about the need to stay on task, but he did say to keep an eye out, didn't he? Then again, what good does this do me? We still don't know where Vesitorak is, only that his forces are close. As always, puppets make those markings all the time. Doing my best to appear calm, I shrugged my submachine gun strap higher on one shoulder. It's like a dog peeing on a fence. Probably an old one anyway, so nothing to worry about. Unconvinced, the gunner's mate, a scrawny red-haired kid, raises one bushy eyebrow. "It wasn't there when we started digging in 3 hours ago." Unnerved, I stared at him and fought a shiver. That close? They'd come that close? The trees had obviously shaded them from the sun's rays, but still, it wasn't good, just like the autostalker stampede. Vesitorak is on the cusp of being able to move in broad daylight, and he knows it. They're following our convoys, all the way north, waiting for the precise moment to strike. Still, I couldn't panic, not now, and certainly not in front of these men. I was an officer, and that meant I had to lead by example like Chris did. Good officers didn't show fear. Good officers found solutions when they ran into problems. Good officers took care of their soldiers no matter what, and above all, good officers didn't run from trouble when it came knocking. Even if my orders prevented me from staying, I had to do something, give some assurance to these troopers who were of the same stripe as me. With a straightened back, I mustered up every ounce of courage I had and gave them a stern nod. "I'll let command know. Until then, make sure there's always 2 people awake on night watch, and I'll keep one ear to my radio. If anything happens, you call for me, and we'll drive right through to back you up, okay?" That brought a few relieved smiles to their painted faces, and the oldest boy made an appreciative salute as I turned to leave. "Thank you, ma'am." Sloshing through the mud back to my own platoon sent a spike of shame through my chest, as something deep down inside begged me to stay. In spite of how awful the aid station was, with its nightmarish cries, the heartbreaking groans of the wounded and dying, I didn't want to leave the young garrison alone. Vesitorak was out there somewhere, circling like a wolf with his cursed puppet army, though why they hadn't attacked yet, I couldn't say. The aid station had enough firepower to keep him at bay, in theory at least, but I remembered how quickly our forces deteriorated the first time we'd run into the Mold King's children. However, the war waited for no one, and while I hated to go against my gut, I knew Sean was right. The sooner we reach the safety of Black Oak's walls, the better. Maybe we'll get lucky, and the rotted creep will step on a landmine or something. Surely that would do him in? Or perhaps a nice fat smart bomb, courtesy of Elsa. Brooding on my misgivings, I climbed back into my truck, and Lucille pressed her face to the small window between the cab and armored compartment with a glowing smile. "Did you hear? The nurses said our forward units captured one of those fancy armored trucks Elsa drives. It even has heated seats. They said it might all be over before Christmas." My spine tingled, the scars under my tattoos itched, and I glared at the nearby tree line with a sick feeling in my guts. We'll see.
Until next time, subscribe to stay up to date with all updates. No screamers or shocking moments, only comfort and safety. Bye.